Uh, Hi, I'm Stephen Cavett, President of the Asia Pacific Board for the TEA, Themed Entertainment Association. Welcome to our program today, where we'll be talking about technology trends and new upcoming exciting products and ideas. So I'm joined by Paul Boyland and Mike Ross. And Paul, I'll kick it over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Stephen. Yeah, my name is Paul Boyland. I'm Business Development Team Manager at Panasonic Projector and Display, and also on the board for TEA APAC, located in Japan. For this webinar, we're not planning for this to be an exhaustive or complete introduction of all the greatest things happening in the tech world today. But we noticed that we're often having conversations with each other about new, interesting things that are happening. And we thought rather than having a conversation just between a few people, we may as well open it up and share some of our thoughts with the world, and hopefully be able to get some questions from viewers as well. So the way the webinar is going to be structured is that we are going to briefly introduce some of the things that we think are the big trends in video for myself, and Stephen will do the same for audio. And we'll also have some comments from Mike on what he is looking at in other fields of technology, and we'll also have some free discussion between us about how we think those various technologies interplay with each other and how they affect the industry.
Great. And I'm Mike Ross, director and founder of Blue Alchemy Labs. I'm a themed experience and attraction design company based down here in Australia. I'm also one of the vice presidents for the TA APAC division. So we'll start off with some questions for both of you guys, yeah?
Great.
All right, well, let's kick it off with you, Paul, with projection versus LED. So they've both got their place, but are we at a turning point? Where do you see projection shining, and where is LED pulling ahead?
Yeah, so I think obviously the last few years have seen a big increase in LED projects, and a lot of them are really amazing and gain lots of attention. Things like the Sphere in Las Vegas, the Cosm series of sports bars or sports arenas are really cool, done with all LED. With LED, obviously the big advantage is the brightness, so that you can use them outdoors. Even during the daytime, you can get amazing brightness. The pixel pitch on them is getting smaller and smaller, so that you get really good resolution out of them. The drawbacks of LEDs are that they're big and heavy. They take a long time to install. They're hard to move around. They can be very harsh on the eyes when you're looking at them up close, compared to projection. And the other big advantage of projection is that you can use it to transform a space. So whereas an LED, even the curved LEDs and the more flexible LED strips that are coming along now, it's still the LED itself that you're looking at. So there's only so much you can do to make a unique shape. Whereas with projection, you're projecting out into the world. So you can project onto a screen, obviously, but you can do mapping onto buildings, mapping onto objects, stuff like that. So, for example, one of the really amazing projects that has happened recently is the Gallery restaurant in Los Angeles, where what they've done there using our projectors is to create a dining experience where you have an amazing full course meal, and there's projection onto the table, onto the objects around the walls. So you're in a fully immersive space having this meal, which is something that really wouldn't work with LED. If you had bright LED right on the table here, it would be either way too bright, or the pixel pitch, would make it so that it's not looking realistic. With projection, you can have a lot more interaction and, an amazing environment. So another reason that projectors can work a lot better by being smaller and lighter is when you're going into an existing space. So if you, for example, we just had a recent project with a very old theater in London where they did a Dr. Strangelove stage production there. So if you were building a theater from scratch, maybe you could plan to have LED screens, but when you're going into an old London theater that's been there for hundreds of years, You're not going to take in a big LED structure and build it up on the stage. Instead, they used projection to create the backdrops for the stage. So you just needed to have projectors installed at the back of the theater. And the great thing about that was that when they switched venues to a theater, I believe in Belfast, they only had a week in between performances. All they had to do was move the projectors and set them up again in the new theater rather than dismantling and reinstalling an LED screen. So stuff like that, where you have limits on space or weight, can be places where projectors can really shine.
Right. So when you're trying to blend screens into a physical space or hide the tech entirely, what's the trickiest part? And do you have any clever hacks that you've discovered?
Yeah, I mean, hiding the projectors ourselves isn't usually Panasonic's role. Generally, it's the clients who are coming up with creative ways to do that. But I could definitely talk about some of the ways that I've seen it be done really well. I think my favorite example of not just this, but of any experience, immersive experience in general, is Moment Factory's night walks. And personally, my favorite is the Kamui Lumina, which is in the northern island of Japan in a national park. So when I first visited that space, I went during the day and walked around, and it was just a completely natural park. There were deer walking around, beautiful, amazing trees. You know, it was a forest. And then I went back in the evening, and all of a sudden there was sound, there was projection, there was smoke. It was completely transformed into a multimedia space. But walking through during the day, you never would have noticed. You didn't notice that there were projectors. You didn't notice that there were speakers. Obviously, after you've had the experience and you go back and look, you can find them. But they did an amazing job there, and they faced the additional difficulty in that it was a natural park. They weren't allowed to, cut down trees or damage the natural environment at all. But they managed to install the equipment and hide it under natural, trees and brushes and plants, as well as some, artificial green sheets and that sort of thing. But they did a really good job of making sure that everything was hidden and blended into the real world. And I think that can be even easier when you're working in a space that you're constructing. So it's best to do it. I think that the most important thing really to keep in mind is to think about that at the design phase. So don't wait until you have your projectors installed in the space and speakers and everything else and look around and say, wow, I really don't want to see that piece of equipment in the ceiling, because there's any number of things that you can do at the design phase of building out your space so that the projectors are embedded in the wall and there's just a lens sticking out. Or the projectors are installed with an extra flap that makes them invisible to where the audience is standing, and you just see the light on the screen. So there's any number of ways to do it, but the most important thing is to think ahead rather than trying to retrofit something once you're in the space and realize that you don't like being able to see all the equipment.
So we're seeing some crazy innovations, from curved LED to domes to superfine pixel pitches. How is that changing the way that you think about content or design, or even what's some of the craziest innovations you've seen?
I think what we are seeing a lot of innovation from the hardware side. And I think the most interesting thing that it does is give new options to creators. So, you're not tied into just displaying images on a 16:9 screen or a series of 16:9 screens. So something like projection mapping is a great example of that, where you can be projecting images onto any shape of a canvas, and the canvas can be a building or a mountain or any kind of thing like that. So for example, we cooperate with the largest projection mapping event in the US, which is called Blink Cincinnati. And they transform their cityscape with images. And so that's the kind of thing that is only possible with high brightness, high resolution projectors. And we've got similar projects all over the world where these new technologies allow artists to look at the real world as a canvas and create content in a way that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise.
Awesome. That actually reminds me of Vivid Sydney, which is coming up here in a few months, where they projection map, and it's a kind of a festival of lights and video across the entire city. But the biggest kind of well-known one is when they map the entire Sydney Opera House every year, and it kind of just lights up the whole harbor every year. So,
and we have a friend. We have a friend of the TEA in Tokyo that does the big Godzilla projection map onto the Tokyo government building, right, in Akasaka.
Yes,
I think you probably know all about that.
Absolutely, yes. It has received the Guinness Award for the world's largest permanent projection mapping project onto a building. And yeah, it's onto the Tokyo government building. And the idea with that was that, right now Japan has experienced a tourism boom. And Tokyo is packed with tourists, but they all go to the same few locations. And the government wanted to create a new spot where people would go, especially in the evenings, and stay out later, spend money in the restaurants around that area. And they did a very good forward-looking project where they brought on Panasonic, they brought on content creators, they brought on a whole team and did something big and amazing and long-lasting. So the projectors are installed to create a really amazing experience, but then they also have a forward-looking plan to cycle through new content. So they're constantly creating new content to go on there. So it's always a new and exciting tourist spot.
All right, Stephen, these are for you. So spatial audio is everywhere right now, but in a moving environment like a theme park or museum, what does immersive really mean to you?
So I thank you for the question, Mike. It's a really good question. And I should also mention that I'm founder and chief executive of TrueSound International Limited, which is a 3D immersive and interactive audio platform. So this is why I can speak on this topic with some authority. Immersive is a very broad term, and it's definitely finding its way more into the mainstream of all kinds of different things: retail, hospitality, theme parks, entertainment, new entertainment. So that can mean different things to different people, but I'll give a brief breakdown of some of the different technologies because I think that is the critical thing to understand. If you take one piece away from this audio discussion, it's that immersive audio isn't one thing. It's a lot of different kinds of things. So quickly, TrueSound, my company does what we call object-based audio, and this is something more akin to like game audio engines for video games. Those typically work in binaural settings or headphone settings. Ours works in a complete speaker array environment, so no headphones required. That's very much the point for us. So what object-based means is that we place an audio object in a specific 3D space. Close to that is something like Dolby Atmos, which is vector-based or VBA systems, and that uses set vectors of speaker arrays to place sounds. Those are really good for static audiences, like in cinema, where you're sitting and you're just receiving the information, not so much in dynamic environments where you're moving around. Then the third predominant technology is wavefield synthesis, or WFS. This would be something more like hollow plot at the sphere. That is, as they would say, sound beaming. And really what that technology is beaming sound in a similar way to projector beaming light. So it's really good at delivering specific audio to a specific place. Doesn't move around, again, kind of meant more for a static audience in a particular place. Those are the three tentpole technologies that really define what immersive audio is. And we haven't even gotten into interactive, but what's the next question?
So, have you worked on anything recently where the sound reacted to the guests or the space in real time? And if so, how tricky was that to get right?
Oh, here we go, right on cue into the interactive side. So immersive audio definitely means immersive, and that gives you the 360 sphere of audio around the listener. But another important aspect is interactivity. So yes, we have worked on projects and are working on projects where this is a really important part of the process. Without naming names, we're working on a large dark ride, flume ride actually, at a big park in Asia. And one of the component parts is movement of the sound effects track that's following along with the ride vehicle. And I don't want to tempt any fates or make this sound easier than it really is, but it's a pretty straightforward process. Straightforward when you choose the right tools. So we work with a company called Zack Track, that's famous for doing lighting tracking, and for us it works great. And we just use a RFID tracker, and then the sounds map directly with that RFID tracker. That's a lot of programming that goes on behind the scenes for that, but essentially that's the process. It is pretty straightforward, actually. In our case, for True Sound, we were able to track multiple objects. I think 24 or something was the upper limit, but that was just what we tested. So I don't know that that is even really a solid upper limit. So we can have multiple things moving around. It's probably worth mentioning, since we're talking about moving audio around in spaces, just because you have 24 possible moving objects does not mean you should use all of them all at once. So a quick rule of thumb, which might be the other thing that's a good takeaway, up to about 8, but definitely under 10 moving objects at one time is standard. If you get much above that, our ears actually start to condense that down into stereo, so you're going to lose the spatialization. So theoretically, yes, you can have 100 different things moving around in a soundscape, but for us, we think there's a good line between, or a good balance between placement, which just means sounds are in a soundscape area, and then movement, which is the kind of the focal point or the point source audio that you want people to pay attention to. So yes, so that's tracking plus, to answer your question.
Great.
Anything else?
Yeah. Can you think of a moment where the sound completely changed the vibe of an experience, like it wouldn't have landed the same without it?
Oh, yes.
Very
Well,
loaded question.
yeah. Well, great. Now I have a very loaded answer. So a big fat yes to that. And pretty much any experience where you go from 2D to 3D is a really transformative difference. And it's, I'll say it this way, in bringing True Sound into the world, the first steps while we were developing the system were me explaining to people what this was. And it really was like it was like trying to run in sand. You can't explain audio, you have to experience it. So once people started to experience it, that difference is really apparent very quickly. There's nothing subtle about a 3D audio experience versus a 2D audio experience. Specifically, the project that I was just mentioning at the theme park in Asia, the biggest part of our brief was to, quote, clean up the audio. And what that meant was the 2D audio, everything coming out of all speakers all the time in a reverberant space was a real problem. And what TrueSound was able to do is, first of all, layer everything. So it's not everything all the time. It's curated things at the right time. So you get the right layering happening, so that declutters the sound just immediately, and also helps with reverberation, because the way we deliver audio to a particular point in space doesn't entirely eliminate, but it does mitigate the effect of reverberation. But also because we are directing sound, things like animatronics can actually be talking. So instead of it coming from a speaker at the other end of the scene, it's coming from their mouth. So it kind of goes beyond just cleanup or a general difference between 2D and 3D. You're actually bringing these characters to life because of the placement and the 3D process. So when I say transformative, it really kind of goes beyond whatever you might be imagining is transformative. It really, I'll say this. The reason I named the company TrueSound was because it's meant to sound like a natural, true listening experience. And that's the difference between 2D and 3D. So hopefully that answers your questions.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're seeing AI show up in all sorts of ways. From Disney's Project Kiwi with its autonomous Groot is a great example of blending robotics, sensors, and machine learning into a live character. But we've also got tools generating content, managing crowd flow, or even adapting storylines on the fly. So let's talk AI, right? Everyone's either terrified or obsessed. What do you think it actually adds value in immersive experiences, and where we may be getting a bit carried away? This is for both of you.
Paul, you want to jump in?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think we haven't really seen too much of AI being used in actual content yet, in terms of live experiences, just because there is still the danger for things to go wrong, either to show something that's inappropriate to the audience, or to show something that maybe infringes on IP of somebody else who you don't want to be infringing on, that sort of thing. But I think those are kind of the early teething pains of AI, and it without being an AI expert, it seems like the kind of thing that shouldn't be that hard to solve in the near future. With video and live experiences, the big trend for the last 5 to 10 years has been interactivity, and creating content in real time that changes depending on your audience behavior. So anything as simple as having being able to walk up to a wall and brush away flower petals, or chase butterflies around a room or something like that. These are things that are very common, and are done now with pre-created content and servers interacting with motion sensors in the space. But once you can integrate AI into something like that, you can have more variety of effects that'll be happening in real time, and you'd be able to more adapt to the visitors quicker. So in the same space, on different days, you may have older visitors who are more interested in seeing kind of calmer, natural things. And in the same space, at a different time of that day, you have a bunch of school kids who are more interested in things that'll move around fast and they can run around the space. So these are the kinds of things that, once you have AI integrated, it's much easier to develop quickly the variety of different effects like that.
Great.
Yeah, and I think Paul covered that really well. The only thing I can add from an audio standpoint is it's just been an ongoing issue, isn't the right word, but an ongoing component part of audio delivery is the nonlinear, and that's something that AI, in particular with the game audio, or what we call now rendering engines, can do in real time. So I think a combination of those things can really lead to very compelling, interesting, nonlinear experience. So never to be duplicated again. I think that's the at least the, and like Paul mentioned, I think once we go through the teething pains of developing appropriate inline content, these things are going to take off pretty quickly. I mean, from the technical audio standpoint, we probably wouldn't need to do a whole ton of audio content creation, because this would again be more of a non-linear thing that would be driven by a larger game or rendering engine like Unreal, and that's something we already do. So we would just be matching content to whatever the rendering engine would be producing, whether that was real-time AI content creation or something that had already been predetermined. So in a sense, we already do that, but that's not really an AI. The other piece would be AI, actual AI content creation in the audio space. And for us, anyways, at TrueSound, this would be more, not so much the content, but how it's delivered. So let's say we have a bunch of audio assets for an experience, and the content exists, but the way it's generated or presented changes depending on day, night, age of the audience, or any proclivities that they might opt into, with a mobile app or something like this. So that's something that we're developing, where an AI can make decisions about on the fly delivery of spatialized audio content. So that might be handy, let's say, if you aren't a sound designer and you need to have some appropriate content, say like in a museum. And I don't know what to do with this stuff, but you can set some prompts or parameters within our system, and the AI would make some intelligent choices about how to distribute and where to distribute the sounds. That's a pretty straightforward use of AI. It's not terribly complicated or dangerous, as far as I know. So those would be a couple examples from the audio side.
Yeah, I think Stephen makes a good point there about AI, not just on the content side, but kind of through the entire workflow of a entertainment space or interactive space. So with projection, it used to be that you had to if you were using multiple projectors in space, you had to go through a fairly painstaking process of not just plotting out where the projectors should be placed and what lenses they use, but then also on site blending them together, very carefully. It's still a process that has to be done. It still takes time, but we and others have introduced a bunch of tools that make that a lot easier than it used to be. So things like using cameras to automatically capture and check whether alignment is proper, not just at the install time, but periodically over time, making sure that the projectors are still blended properly. And that's something that I think with AI is just going to become more and more powerful, to the point where hopefully at some time in the future, you can just show up at a site and your AI friend will tell you exactly where to put the projector on the floor or wherever, and you turn it on, and then your AI friend will align everything and you'll be ready to go with 100 projectors in 30 seconds or whatever. We're not there yet, but I think that's pretty clearly the obvious endpoint of AI use in the workflow.
That just kind of makes me feel a bit obsolete. My job used to be sitting inside a planetarium for 2 to 3 weeks doing all that manually. Now our little AI friend can just say, done.
Yes.
Yeah,
well,
and you can.
There's a lot of us who are going to feel obsolete, I think.
Well, the not just that, but being able to sit anywhere in the world and press a button to do time alignment for audio, or visual alignments with projectors. Yeah, that's where my mind went to. So thanks for saying it so I didn't have to, Mike.
So, in the last few years, we've seen some fascinating uses of XR and MR in location-based experiences, from VR backpacks and free roam environments like Dreamscape or The Void, to AR layers over real sets and museum interactives and brand activations. So, MR and XR are getting more and more seamless every year. Do you both see these tools helping deepen physical experiences, or do they risk pulling guests out of the moment?
I think it's both, really. Obviously, if it's done well, you can create, I think the biggest advantage is just providing a lot more information to your visitors all at once. And if they're done well, if they're not done well, they separate visitors from the experience as well as from each other. So I think that's the biggest thing. Also, the headsets are still far from perfect. So especially if you wear glasses, you're not going to want to be walking around with something on your head, no matter, they have obviously come down in size and weight, but they still have a long way to go there. So I think there are interesting use cases, but there's still a long way to go before these things are perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I worked on a couple of mixed reality. I spent 3 years working on one in London, but just it at the end of the day, you notice the technology because the mixed reality headsets, the field of view was so narrow, everything was being cut off. Where I find, for instance, on the other side of things, if you go on Mario Kart at Universal Studios, they're using larger visors, so that field of view that's covered by the mixed reality glasses is more all-encompassing, and you're more immersed in the environment. So I think, like you said, yeah, sometimes that technology can detract from the experience, but if you get it right, it also enhances it.
Yeah, and I would just add that whatever the wearable is, whether it's a CPU backpack or a headset or headphones, the less obtrusive or non-existent those are, the better those experiences are going to be for a group. So again, this is why we designed the system we designed, which is to allow people to not be thinking about the tech. And frankly, no matter how good your visuals are in your headset, if you're wearing a 10-pound or 5-pound CPU on your back, you're not going to forget that you're wearing a CPU. So I think the tendency is toward, in general, I think the tendency is towards something more natural where you're just walking into a space and experiencing something as opposed to being kitted out with a bunch of stuff, especially if there's no story to the kitting out. So we worked on a project for back in the Fox days for Alien, and it was a VR experience, and it was a shooter. You were participating. It was kind of a movie game experience. So there was some participation. A lot of that participation had to do with shooting xenomorphs. So getting part of that kit was part of the story. So you go into a chamber and you put your helmet on. The helmet happened to be the headset. So there was a story behind everything, and you got your rifle, but it was just a plastic toy, and it was the Unreal Engine that was doing all the actual shooting and visuals of what you had in your hand, but you had a headset on, so you didn't know it was just a toy. So there was a story behind all of that, but I think the more the technology blends into the background, the more successful these are going to be as experiences in general, whether it's an otherworldly thing or something meant to be really natural. Because I hate to say it, but if the story is about the tech, like maybe some certain circular buildings that are very large in the world, that story fades really quickly. The content in the story is what's most important. So the more the tech can recede into the background, I think the more successful these things are going to be.
Yeah, and I think that kind of hits into why VR coasters used to be really, really big things, and they've kind of faded out. I remember going on a couple and I noticed that, yeah, I'm looking at a great environment. I'm on a coaster, but I'm aware I'm wearing a headset. I'm not feeling the wind in my face. And actually, everyone at the other side of the coaster that's not wearing a headset is screaming and laughing. Everyone where I am is looking around at the graphics. And like, it was a great thing at the time, but I was focused on the headset I was wearing rather than being on a coaster. So I think that's absolutely right. Like, if it's detracting from the experience or it's the focus, unlike the aliens or when they did the Ghostbusters VR where you got your proton pack and it was your helmet where it's part of the experience, it doesn't blend seamlessly and doesn't work.
Yeah, I think actually, Mikey, you made a good point about Mario Kart and why it works so well is that, like Stephen was saying, is that it's part of, putting on the helmet that you would be doing if you're driving in the Mario Kart race, right? And a similar attraction is the Chaos Carts facilities in the UK and in the Middle East, where what they've done is they've outfitted a warehouse with projection on the floor and walls, and you drive around in a real go-kart, and you're playing a game similar to Mario Kart, where you drive over objects, pick them up, and you can throw them at each other or collect points and that sort of thing. But it's done all with projection, so it is AR in terms of you're dealing with the real space of the warehouse, but also with projected objects, and it works really well because it is so seamless. And you don't have any kind of equipment on your face. The car is fitted out with a whole bunch of equipment, but you're just driving it like you would a regular go-kart. So you don't notice all the extra equipment that's put onto it. And when you look over at your friend who's also driving and playing the game, you can see them and they can see you and you all hear the same stuff. So it's a really incredible experience that is a mixed reality experience, but done without any personal wearable technology at all.
That's a great example, yeah.
So just to add to that point, really what we're talking about is tools and different kinds of tools for different situations. And a great artist, a great storyteller will choose the right tools for the kind of story or experience they're trying to create. So it may be entirely appropriate to wear a headset or some kind of a wearable, but have that in combination with something else, like maybe not headphones in an immersive experience. So Paul, when you're describing a go-kart where you can see your friends in this AR environment, but you're all hearing the same thing and having the same sound experience, that to me speaks of a situation where some of this more invasive tech will work if it's in line with story, but then others, you might choose a less invasive type of technology, so not headphones or other kinds of wearables. So I think the exciting thing for artists is that we're developing these tools, and I think again the really good storytellers, the good artists, are going to pick and choose the right tools and be better off for the abundance of choices.
Sustainability is a big theme right now, whether that's using low power LED systems, designing hardware with a longer lifespan, or even reusing digital content across attractions to reduce your carbon footprint. More clients are asking about it, but not everyone knows where to start. So how do you think we can make immersive tech more planet friendly? Do you have any examples, some stuff you've worked on where you've had to tackle this?
From a hardware manufacturer point of view, I think we have two main axes that we look to improve on. First is the durability of our equipment. So, if we can make a projector that people can use for 6 years instead of 3, or 12 years instead of 6, or on and on and on, obviously that's going to be a lot more environmentally friendly. And the second that we really focus on is making each projector more environmentally friendly, paying attention to where we source our parts, that sort of thing. And also, I guess I should have said there's three main ways, but especially with projectors and especially in the event space, one area that we've really put a lot of effort into is making our equipment smaller and lighter. So a lot of the environmental impact for the equipment over the lifetime of its use comes from shipping it around. So it's different if you're in a permanent theme park or something like that, but if you're in an event space where you're shipping your projectors around, constantly, more weight leads to more fuel. Bigger size means that you can fit less in each truck. You need to use more trucks. So we put a lot of effort into shrinking the size and the weight of our, especially our higher end projectors that are used a lot in the event space.
So just to echo what Paul was saying, for us, sustainability is not a huge theme for us, but some of those component pieces are really important, and I think lay a good foundation for when sustainability is more important for my company. And like Paul was describing, using a modular approach so that our systems will, the actual box that you buy is going to sit in your rack a lot longer than normally, and we're not looking for ways to make that obsolete. But from a to shift perspective, we're trying to focus more on updating features that we can deliver to that box. So once you get the box, it can remain there, and then it can be upgraded or updated, and that's where we're focusing more on software programming and delivery systems, so that it's something that goes over the cloud or the internet, not something that you have to ship in an airplane or a container ship. So that's one way we would deal with it. I think it's kind of hard when you're talking about a soft science or an entertainment component that it's not like in environmental or scenic where you can have some really substantial impact on the environment just by how you do things. I might get crucified for saying this, but I don't think audio is a significant contributor to sustainability issues.
Well, I mean, wouldn't you say, though, that amplifiers are slowly getting more compact and requiring less power, which means therefore, reducing a carbon footprint because you're getting more oomph, but requiring less amps?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that ties in with what Paul was saying about projector size and weight. So the same exact thing is true with amplifiers and even speakers. So yes, I knew as soon as I said that somebody would immediately contradict me, and I'm glad it was you. One of the nice byproducts of a nicely layered 3D audio environment is that the SPL, or the sound pressure level, does not need to be as big as it would be normally, because if you're in a 2D space and it's large, you need to fill it with a lot of SPL in order to get that sound from one end of the room to the other. But if the entire room is a sweet spot and you're delivering specific sounds to specific areas, you can bring the overall volume down. And that project I was describing earlier, where we were cleaning up the audio, that was a big part of it. Like the sound experience is not even the same, it's much better, but the SPL levels came way down. And that really, it helps for audio quality. And I'm gonna bring up something that you're not really asking, but it does fit into this topic, which is like noise pollution and ear fatigue. And those are things that we don't really talk much about in the theme park or entertainment space, but it's a real thing. And just for example, if you're walking through a theme park and you have multiple sound sources at high SPLs bombarding you all at the same time, you're going to get ear fatigue, and it's going to cause you to be grumpy and want to get out of there. and 9.9 out of 10 times, your guests aren't going to be able to tell you why they were having a bad time. But this would be a huge contributing factor to that. So in a way, it's true that we do contribute to a more friendly, sustainable environment because we can bring down those volume levels, and that helps with ear fatigue and other wellness issues. But you're right, Mike, it absolutely, you don't need that big rack of huge amplifiers anymore. We can do this with smaller and more compact boxes, which we are in fact doing right now. It's happening today, right now.
And I think an interesting thing about the sustainability issue is, we're always interested in how important that is to our customers as well. Because, while obviously we innovate and, we care about sustainability and we try to do as much as possible, I think a little bit of what Stephen is talking about is that, when people are choosing an audio or video system, sustainability is not necessarily at the top of their mind. And it depends a lot on, the region of the world, the economic situation, how expensive electricity happens to be at the time that people are planning projects. So I think we're always interested to hear from our customers, when we're talking about a new project, how important that side of things is. And if it is very important, there are things that we can suggest, about how to make the project more sustainable. And, if it's not so important, then obviously we're focusing more on, image quality and more standard specifications like that.
Thanks so much to both of you, Stephen and Paul, for sharing your insights and stories. It's been a fantastic conversation touching on everything from projection tech and spatial audio to the role of AI, mixed reality, and sustainability in shaping where we are headed next. And thank you to everyone who's been tuning in.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's been great to talk about audio. We often don't get to come out of the shadows, so it's nice to highlight some of this new tech that's already here among us. And Mike, really great questions. Thank you for that. And Paul, thanks so much for enlightening me on things I didn't know about projectors. And thank you all for listening.
Yep. Thank you very much to both of you. Glad we could have this conversation and share it with everybody. Hopefully people found it interesting. And thanks everyone for tuning in. And we look forward to your questions.
Yeah, so with that, we're going to switch gears now and open it up to a live Q&A. So if you've got questions, big or small, drop them into the chat and we'll get through as many as we can. So let's keep this conversation going. Thanks.